Good day. My name is Rich Chester. I'm the Director of Consulting at LPA Software Solutions, and I'm also in charge of our business intelligence practice. Today, along with Brendan Austin, who is in charge of our financial performance management practice, we're very happy to be here and talk to you about the latest release of IBM Cognos Express, which is version 10.2.2. The agenda for today is first we'll talk about some big changes that are part of the 10.2.2 release. We'll follow that up with a focus on a bunch of the new features and functions available to you as part of the reporter tier of Express. And then Brendan will follow that up with what's new in the Xcelerator tier of Express. And we'll follow that up with any questions that you might have. As we go, please submit your questions through the chat feature of the webinar. Any questions that we don't get to during the webinar, we will follow up in writing via email after the webinar. So please submit your questions, and if we don't happen to get to them on the air, as they say, then we will get to them afterwards, and we will send you an email. First of all, let's talk about the big news in Cognos Express 10.2.2. Fundamentally, the big change is that Cognos Express is no longer a separate set of software from the standard business intelligence and TM1 enterprise software that IBM publishes. So heretofore, in previous releases, Express has been its own software set. It's had its own release cadence. Therefore, the incidence of the introduction of new features and functions has been separate from the enterprise software and so on. Now, starting with the 10.2.2 release, there is no separate software. You will install Enterprise Business Intelligence if you have licensed Reporter, and you'll install Enterprise TM1 if you have licensed Xcelerator or Planner or Advisor. So as a result, now you're going to immediately get all of the enterprise enhancements at the same time the folks with an enterprise license get them. The difference is that your license, which will read that you own Express and that you are entitled to certain features and functions of the Enterprise BI and the Enterprise TM1, won't change. So it's a license difference now, no longer a software distance. You can install TM1 and BI if you own Reporter and one of the other towers. Licensing is not different. Part numbers are not different. Their maintenance and support contract are not different. What's different is now there is not a separate code base. And you'll be able to upgrade to 10.2.2, provided you have an active support contract now for your Express licenses. And indeed, you'll be able to install TM1 and BI, or if you will, Xcelerator and Reporter, on separate machines for the very first time as a result of this change. Now, because of this change, because it's not separate software, because Express is no longer unique from the enterprise versions, there are some changes that are going to be important for you to internalize, and as part of this migration, migrate to. First of all, there is no longer a preset configuration that you must install. So previous releases of Cognos Express required an Informix content store, had a wizard-driven installation where there was a minimum number of configuration steps or configuration options that you had. That's no longer true. Now that you're installing the enterprise versions of BI and TM1 under your Express license, you have detailed documentation on any number of different installation options in terms of databases for your content store and for your sample data, the authentication providers that you use to manage usernames and passwords, other security options, how you would configure your gateway. So there's a ton of documentation, as you might imagine, along that goes with all of those options. And in addition, of course, since this is a change and you are going from this preset world to a world of options, there is a whole bunch of information that IBM has published with the release about how you migrate from the preset configuration of previous releases to some of the configuration options that you have with this enterprise software install. One of the changes I just alluded to is about users and authentication. With previous versions of Cognos Express, how you defined users, how you authorized users for rights to the different pieces of Express was through a tool called Manager. And the Manager tool, as well as the ability to create users with the Manager tool, is not part of the 10.2.2 release and going forward. So there is no predefined collection of users and user groups that are part of Express, which means that you'll need to migrate to one of the supported security components that are part of the enterprise software. So typically with Express users, you had this built-in user group, or you could use, one of the options was Microsoft Active Directory. If you're Active Directory now in your previous versions of Express, you can stay Active Directory moving forward. But you also have other configurations that you could use for user groups. And again, as we talk about migration, and if you do change how you define users and what is your authentication source in terms of where your usernames and passwords are defined, of course, that's part of your migration to ensure that what they built under their old username is part of what they still have when you migrate to 10.2.2 and bring that up under their new username. I mentioned this before, I'll mention it again. The Express Manager tool has been retired. It is no longer part of the Express stack going forward. TM1 has its own way of administering. BI has its own way of administering. They're very well documented, and you'll use the native to enterprise administration functionality going forward rather than Express Manager. One of the other things you did through Express Manager was you did backup and restore. Through that tool, now instead you'll use the backup and store methodologies that are baked into the enterprise tools, TM1 and BI. Installing client software. There is client software on the Planner and Xcelerator side. There is client software on the Reporter side. The way you distribute that client software, it used to be through a download page that was part of Express. That's not how you distribute that software with the enterprise tools, and therefore moving forward in 10.2.2 Express, you'll install clients the same way that the enterprise users install clients, which means there's a setup disk for all of the client software that you would execute. So it's not going to be downloaded through a page. It's going to be through having an installation kit that you would download from Passport Advantage, or that you could actually request from IBM Physical Media. The Express Advisor tool has been retired. So any reports that you have built with Express Advisor in previous releases would either be converted to TM1 Web report, or you would use Reporter, therefore Cognos BI, to replace or rewrite those reports that you had originally built with Advisor. Now, in terms of mapping, what we show here is there's a couple of slides that show things that you used to be able to do through the Express Manager tool and where they fall in the enterprise tools. So first here we'll talk about the Reporter stack. So the Reporter stack had some administration features like the Manager tool, Backup and Restore, and the Users tool. Now, Users does not have an analog in Enterprise BI. Users would be defined in Microsoft Active Directory or another security or authorization source to BI. But Backup and Restore and the other functions of Manager map over to the administration features and business intelligence through this tool. This is the welcome screen on what's known as the Cognos connection, which is part of the BI stack. Now, the Reporter functionality, the ability to create reports, create workspaces, to do ad hoc reporting, those functions that you got through Reporter by going into the web-based tool and launching Report Studio and launching Cognos Workspace Advanced and so on. Well, those are all replaced by the enterprise versions of those tools. Report Studio, Workspace Advanced, and so on are all part of the enterprise tools. So create workspaces is Cognos Workspace. Author business reports with the Compass, that's Cognos Workspace Advanced. Author of Advanced Reports is Report Studio. So there is a direct mapping between all of the reporter functionality you're used to and the enterprise tool. Plus, you've got this new administration area of the enterprise tool that replaces a lot of, but not all of, the functions in Manager. Most specifically, it doesn't replace this notion of users. That's done through a separate authentication source. On the Planner and Xcelerator side, what's shown here is the installation, pick the software you're installing component of the setup.exe. That is the, when you run setup and you're running TM1 onto a server, what are the different pieces you can install with the standard TM1 enterprise setup. So you can install Planner components, you can install Xcelerate components, you can install client software components. All of those components are available through the setup.exe that you run when you install Enterprise TM1. Note again that Advisor had no circle and arrow on it. Advisor has been retired. So that's the mapping of the Express Manager features and functions over to the enterprise functions for both Reporter and Xcelerator, or if you will, BI and TM1. Now let's jump into what is the new features and functions that you get with version 10.2.2 of Reporter by virtue of installing version 10.2.2 of Enterprise BI. First of all, let's just make very clear what pieces of Enterprise BI you are entitled to by licensing it through the Cognos Express license. First of all, you get Report Studio, Cognos Workspace Advanced, Cognos Workspace, all of the functions that you're used to in terms of authoring reports and creating dashboards. With Enterprise BI, there is some additional things that you would get that are not part of your Express license, specifically dynamic cubes, which are a memory resident cube technology. Since you have access to Xcelerator, that may not be a large gap. Xcelerator TM1 is also a memory resident cube technology. So not having dynamic cubes is probably not a large gap. Analysis Studio and Query Studio are part of the Enterprise 10.2.2 release at the moment. However, this is the very last time in the Enterprise tool that those two studios will be part of the software. So they have been retired. This is the final version of Enterprise for Analysis and Query Studio. Therefore, again, not having them is not going to be a huge gap for you. Real-time monitoring, the Cognos real-time monitoring tool, again, in 10.2.2, that is the last release in the enterprise world that real-time monitoring will be released. So again, having that as a gap in your Express license, not a big deal, because this is the last time anyone, enterprise or Express, will have access to real-time monitoring is the 10.2.2. So not having that for your license, no big deal. Transformer is also known as PowerPlay Transformer. People talk about Power Cubes or PowerPlay Cubes. That is a cube technology that is part of Enterprise BI that is not part of your Express license. Unlike the other tools I've talked about so far, like Analysis and Query Studio and Real-Time Monitoring, there is no plan for the enterprise world of retiring Transformer at the moment. There's no end of life announced for that. However, it has never been part of your Express license, and it still is not part of your Express license, even though you're installing the enterprise software. And additionally, there is an add-in available to enterprise users that comes from a company called Esri, which is an interactive map add-in to Cognos where you could incorporate these robust and highly interactive maps into your Report Studio reports. That is only available with an enterprise license. Cognos Express users do not have access to Esri maps for Cognos. So those are the things that you don't get. One of the things that you do get as part of the 10.2.2 release that you did not automatically have before as an Express user is the SDK. So the software development kit where you could automate a number of functions in the Reporter or BI side was not necessarily available to you as part of an Express license, but now is part of your Express license and is going forward starting with this 10.2.2 release. So you do get something new in addition to the access to the full enterprise software suite as far as enhancements and so on for the licensed components. So with that said, let's jump into what some of the specific 10.2.2 enhancements are in the components that you have. Let's start with Cognos Workspace. So Workspace allows you to create what are essentially multi-tabbed dashboards by reusing components of reports that have been previously written. With this release, however, it's actually possible right within Cognos Workspace to create a new report, specifically so you could put a new widget on a dashboard. So I'll show you a screenshot of that, but the notion here is that you would typically, heretofore, in previous releases of the tool, have to have pre-written a report in Report Studio or Cognos Workspace Advanced, and then you would drag a piece of that report, or perhaps even the whole report, onto your workspace to create a dashboard using that report. Now, you could actually just right-click on a package and create the report you need for the workspace right here in Workspace. There are some new button filters. There's this notion of master filtering, and then a quick orientation change. There's a new property on the filter types so that you could do horizontal or vertical orientation on the sliders and other filters like the button filters and so on in Workspace. So let's just jump in and talk about this new report functionality. So like I mentioned, before, you would have had to create the report that contained the information you wanted for your dashboard and then open a workspace and drag that report onto your workspace. Now with this release, you can navigate in the navigation pane over to a package, right-click on the package, and choose Insert in either Current Tab or Global Area as a new report. And that'll launch Cognos Workspace Advanced. Now, this is provided you have access to Cognos Workspace Advanced as the logged in user. Certainly security is always on, and it is possible to configure some users with and some users without access to CWA. If you have access to CWA and you go into Workspace and do this right click, you'll be able to create a new report. If you don't have access to Cognos Workspace Advanced, you won't have access to this function in Workspace. But the notion here is that you can now create a widget directly in your workspace. Now, you can't save that widget outside the workspace. When you launch Workspace Advanced this way and you create a new report out of the package you've specified, when you are done and you essentially save that report, it saves it into the workspace. There's no way to copy it to another workspace. There's no way to make it an independent report of the workspace. So that's the downside of this. The upside is you don't have to have had somebody else already author what you need for your dashboard. So it's a great enhancement. You can place the new report in the tab that you're currently editing, or you can drop it into the global area. You just can't save the report to the public or my folders after you're done. There is a new filter type that's part of the toolbox in Cognos Workspace. So in the old toolbox, you had this value filter, you had the slider filter. The new one is this button filter, and it's shown here on the bottom in terms of what it might look like. So there's a horizontal button filter that I created using the sample data for the product lines. So I dragged the button filter onto my workspace. I pointed it to the product line data item. It created a button per product line. In the example I'm showing, golf equipment is selected, and therefore it is filtering the widgets on this page to just the golf equipment. So yet another button, another filter type. So slider filters are for measures and non-measures. Value filters are for non-measures, and button filters are for non-measure type data. So you can add interactivity to your workspace with now this new filter button filter. And then there's another way of filtering that's been introduced in 10.2.2 that you can leverage, and this is known as a master filter. So master filters are filters that allow you to take a widget, like the one on the left, the crosstab on the left, and tell the workspace, whatever I click on in this widget, filter all of the other widgets on this workspace based on what I click on. So if there's matching data in other widgets on the same tab, or if the master widget is in the global area on all tabs, the notion is when I click on, let's say, the year 2010 in this master filter widget, all the other widgets with matching corresponding year data in them will also filter to the year I picked. So I could also have clicked on a product line over here on this master filter widget, and had this widget here included product line, it would also filter on the product line I selected. So in addition to the filter tools themselves that are in the toolbox, I can take any widget, any report piece that is on my workspace, designate that as a master filter widget, and then whatever I click on in that widget will filter other widgets. So it enables me to take lists and crosstabs and charts and essentially have them play dual duty. Not only do they express data themselves, but they also filter other items on the dashboard. Moving on to enhancements to Cognos Workspace Advanced, probably the most important one is the ability to customize the interface for the report authoring tools. And it's not just CWA that allows me to customize, it's actually also Report Studio. So the notion here in the 10.2.2 release is that you have two authoring tools, Workspace Advanced and Report Studio. And out of the box, they come with certain features and functions. Workspace Advanced is by and large thought of as the ad hoc query tool, which tends to be more business user oriented. Report Studio is the pixel perfect professional authoring studio, which tends to be more IT oriented. Now, I say tends to be, but there are absolutely end user, business user experts in Report Studio, and there are absolutely IT users of CWA. But the notion here is that they come out of the box with a certain pre-configured set of functions. What you have in your toolbox in CWA is less than what you have in your toolbox in Report Studio. Report Studio has the notion of Query Explorer. Cognos Workspace Advanced does not. You can stick with the exact same interface that you have for CWA and Report Studio, or you can leverage this new functionality that allows you to create custom interfaces for those two tools. So you could start with what is out of the box with CWA and add or subtract from it. Give that profile a name and assign that profile to a set of users. Or you could start with what is standard in Report Studio and subtract from it and name that profile and provide that profile as the default profile for a set of users. So the notion here is that you could create a very, very simple reporting interface, an intermediate reporting interface, an advanced reporting interface for Cognos Workspace Advanced that starts with either everything that's in Report Studio and then you can subtract from that, or everything that's in Workspace Advanced out of the box and you can add or subtract to that. So this gives you a high degree of control by group of users within your organization of the exact report interface that they have when they are creating new reports. Moving on to Report Studio, one of the changes that Cognos has made, or IBM has made, is to make it even easier to create reports starting with templates that you've designed. Templates in a nutshell are a way for you to pre-configure a look and feel for a set of reports, and then you can launch the creation of new reports by making a copy of that template so you inherit that standard look and feel. So there's a new From Template button now on the welcome screen in both CWA and Report Studio. There's some new buttons on the page design and page structure buttons. They're on the Explorer bar. There's a reusing of classes capability that I'll explain, and then there's this notion of tabbed reports. So jumping in first of all to the new buttons. So on the Explorer bar in Report Studio, two new buttons have been added. This is not new functionality. They used to be under View, and you would do View Page Design or View Page Structure. Now, getting to the page design and page structure is just clicking these two buttons on the Explorer bar. So not new functionality, just a new way to leverage or get at that functionality. New functionality, though, does include this notion of reusable report styles. So Report Studio authors probably have leveraged the notion of classes in their Report Studio reports. If you go to the Page Explorer, you'll find that there is a classes folder. When you click on the classes folder, you can go in and you can make global changes to the look and feel of your Report Studio report. You could create local classes, classes that are unique to that report. You could also update the standard classes. One of the things that I do, for example, is I will update the standard width of measure columns and lists and non-measure columns and lists so that I can have my lists all have a fixed width for all of their columns. I could do that on a column by column basis on all the lists in my report, or I can go to the appropriate classes and set them once in the class area, and then all of the lists in my report will be sized appropriately. Also in active reports, I use classes a lot to set colors and styles and use those throughout my report automatically. The thing is that those changes heretofore have been isolated to the report that you defined them in. There's been no way really to share those class changes across reports, short of including them in a template. And then the other problem is, even if I did include them in a template, when I created a new report from the template, if I change the template, the reports that use the template do not update. In other words, when it makes a copy of the report. It doesn't tether the report to the template, therefore it doesn't tether the classes in the copy to the classes in the original. So when I change the classes in the original, I still have to edit all the copies that I made, all the reports that I made, even if I use a template. So with this release, what Cognos has given us is the ability to say, no, I would actually like a report. I'll call it my master class report. I want a report where I do define changes in classes or a bunch of local classes, and then I want to be able to reference in a property of a new report that master class report. And when I change the classes in the master class, it will automatically update any report that is linked to that master class report. So I can do that through the Tools menu. There's a new tool called Style References. So here, this would be my master styles report that I would put in this property. And I would specify that I'm going to allow this new report to inherit the class changes I've made from the master report that I specify. And I could limit the types of class changes. But ultimately, what I indicate is it's linked. And then I indicate when this report should inherit changes that I make in the master report. Should it always inherit them automatically? That's what the runtime setting says. Or will I take a manual step to update this new report with any changes in the master class report? And that's what the manually does, and I would use that refresh now button if I'm going to manually refresh. So with runtime, every time I run the report, it references the master style report, any changes that might be done there in terms of widths or background colors or foreground colors or background effects or any of the properties that I can change in classes would automatically apply to this and any other report that I've tethered to that master class report. And therefore now I can manage centrally the look and feel of all of my reports using classes, which is not something I was able to do before. In the enterprise world, with FixPack 4 of 10.2.1, they introduced this next feature, but it's also listed as a new feature in 10.2.2 for all of the Express folks, and that is the ability with HTML reports to express multiple pages you've defined in Report Studio reports as tabs when they display on the screen. So if I have 4 pages in a Report Studio report, before this ability, all I could do would be to page down to get to each of those tabs. So I'd page down through page 1. When page 1's content's finished, it would show me page 2 and page 3 and page 4, and so on. With 10.2.2, what I can say is actually express at the top or the bottom of the page a tab that represents each Report Studio page. So I could click across the top or click across the bottom to get to my individual report pages that I've defined in Report Studio as tabs when I run in HTML. So that's under the Tools menu under the File menu, under Report Properties, you can turn on this View Pages as tabs, and that only applies when the output type is HTML. Bunch of changes to active reports in this release. There's a preview notion, which I'll cover on a couple of pages. There is the ability to run your active reports in either HTML or MHT, which is important in that only certain browsers support the MHT format, but multiple browsers can support HTML active reports, and therefore you can now run and test your active reports in browsers that don't have MHT capabilities. And just as a reminder, MHT capability is native to Internet Explorer and is achievable through an add-in to Firefox, but is not available to Chrome or Safari users. But now with this change, you can run active reports in Chrome and Safari because of this notion of an HTML formatted active report. Active reports can be converted to templates in this release, which was not something that we had before, and a new property on sliders so that you can set them to either horizontal or vertical orientation. But let's look at this preview button. So on the Explorer bar in Report Studio, we talked about two new buttons, the page design and the page structure views. There is now with active reports a third new button on the Explorer bar, and that is this notion of a preview view. So I'm building an active report and I click on the preview, and what it does is it actually essentially runs the active report inside Report Studio. And then depending on the preview mode you're using, and there are two modes, I can continue to edit my active report even though it's actually running in the work area. So two modes, there is an edit mode and a preview mode. So preview view has a preview mode and preview view has an edit mode. Edit mode on preview, it works like this. You click on the preview button. That is actually the default mode. That's the mode you'll jump into when you click the preview button. When you click on objects in the active report now that has essentially run within the Report Studio work area, you'll still be able to see the property sheets on those and make changes. And as you make those changes, you'll immediately see the updates. So this is a much faster way to develop and examine the layout and look and feel of your active report. It runs within Report Studio, not separately. And as you make changes to the property sheets, you'll see those changes in your active report in the work area. Now, some formatting changes will need you to refresh the report, and there is a button to refresh your report. But the notion here is that now, as I am tweaking the look and feel of an active report, I can do so in a preview mode right within Report Studio. And with edit mode, I get access to the property sheets to do that. Now, if I flip my mode to preview mode, I lose access to the property sheets, but I can test my interactive behavior right there in Report Studio. So again, I don't have to separately run the report to test the interactive behavior. I can do that all now within this preview view inside Report Studio. Also, there's a drop-down that lets me look at my active report in various screen sizes and orientations, even custom screen sizes that I might add to the drop-down list. Another change in version 10.2.2 is that you can set an advanced property in Report Studio and dynamically change worksheet tab names in Excel 2007 based on page breaks. So in Report Studio, you make a page set to do page breaks. And in that page set, you say, for example, on the screen, I'm going to do a new page per product line value. When you exported that to Excel before this new capability, you did not get the names of the product lines as the names of the tabs. You actually just got page identifiers on the names of the tabs. However, with this release, you can enter a new property into the advanced component of the administration screen. And when you do so, for Excel 2007 output, you can tell it when there's a page set, name the pages based on the values that you're using for the page breaks, which will now auto-label as shown in the screen there. In my little case here, when I said page set on product line, it's now auto-labeling each of the tabs with the values of the product lines from my database. So that's a new Excel change. There have been a number of enhancements to the world of visualizations that was introduced earlier in Express in 10.2 release. Visualizations are yet another library of charts that you can add to your reports that are extensible and downloadable. Before this release, there were a number of requirements with visualizations, one of which was that if the visualization had 3 drop zones, you had to fill in all 3 drop zones in order to get the visualization to appear in your report. With 10.2.2, that's no longer the case. You can create visualizations with optional drop zones. In addition, before this release, if you had a need for, let's say, a visualization that showed a bar chart, if you wanted a blue bar chart or a green bar chart or a red bar chart, those actually had to be 3 separate visualizations. There was no way to make the color of the bars something you could set as a report author in Report Studio. You just dragged in the green one when you wanted the green visualization, you dragged in the blue one when you wanted the blue visualization. With 10.2.2, now it's possible for the visualization author to include properties in the visualization so that the Report Studio author can set the colors. So now you don't have to have a whole library of every possible color visualization. Now you can have one visualization that represents, let's say, a bar chart. And in Report Studio, you set the color of the bars. In addition, there's this whole new collection of visualizations you can download that represent maps. So now, in addition to the out-of-the-box maps that are part of Report Studio, there's now a collection of downloadable maps that are part of the visualization library. There's a number of enhancements to this notion of dynamic query mode in 10.2.2. There are 2 query modes in Report Studio: compatible query mode and dynamic query mode. So CQM and DQM. If you use dynamic query mode, which is the newer of the 2, and you are a modeler, there are a number of changes in Framework Manager that you can deep dive into that help you optimize how data is queried, including how one-to-many relationships are implemented in terms of pre-filtering the many with the results of the one, and those kinds of things. I'm not going to dive into any of the details here. I'm just going to make you aware that if you are using dynamic query mode and you are a modeler, that there are some interesting enhancements relative to optimization of joins, the notion of summary queries, and the notion of bridge table links that you might want to leverage as part of the 10.2.2 release. And then finally, there is a new capability in 10.2.2 you might leverage called personal data sets. Personal data sets, or the My Data Sets feature, allows you to upload your own files in CSV or Excel formats to BI and have Cognos create a package that represents the contents of that uploaded file from which you could write a report. So you can generate reports from an uploaded file. Those files are uploaded to a DB2 repository and essentially become a table in DB2, and they're managed through this notion of My Data Sets. You can specify security on those data sets so that they're private to you, or you might even be able to share those data sets with others in your enterprise so that you can both write reports off of the same data set that you manage. To upload, to manage your data set, to change the data, you simply upload a new copy of the file whenever the file has changed. And so you can now manage your personal data and leverage all of the great features and functions of the report authoring tools as well as Cognos Workspace against your personal data using this new personal data sets feature. And now I'm going to turn the microphone over to Brendan Austin, who is the leader of our financial performance management practice, and he's going to talk to you about what all of the new features are in the Xcelerator / TM1 side of Cognos Express 10.2.2.
Thank you, Rich. Like Rich said, my name is Brendan Austin. I'm the FPM lead for LPA systems. Today we're going to be talking about TM1, formerly known as Xcelerator within Cognos Express, and the specifics about what's changed in 10.2.2. Specifically in general, There's a big change with how you can install Xcelerator or TM1 now. Whereas before, with the old versions of Express, you had to install all of the products on one physical machine. You can now segregate the TM1 products from the Cognos BI software on different machines, which allows for better performance overall and better RAM utilization. Those two products are no longer competing for the same set of resources, so they can actually be separated amongst multiple machines. When you install TM1, you're also now no longer limited to just one TM1 instance called CXMD. You can now name your TM1 instances anything you want them to be named. And you can set up as many TM1 instances as you'd like. This allows for better business segregation. For instance, you may have an instance in TM1 where you've got payroll sensitive information that you only want certain users to have access to. So you could set that up on a separate TM1 instance. Each TM1 instance that is set up uses its own set of users and groups within that instance. So you could have users that are only granted access to that payroll application and would not see anything else, and vice versa. As far as the server limitation, similar to the old version of Express, 100 total users across the board, less than or equal to 50 for read-write performance management users on the TM1 side. And you can have 1,600 PBU units assigned to all the servers. In general, there's some additions that 10.2.2 allows in this version of TM1. The first one is the TM1 package connector. This is now integrated with Turbo Integrator, which is the ETL tool that comes with TM1. You can now use a framework manager model as a data source within TM1, which means that data that you've loaded into your Cognos BI space can now be pulled into TM1 and create a cube and or create dimensions off of it. So it's now directly connected to BI. There's also an SAP built-in connector as well. So if you use SAP as your data warehouse or your ERP system, you can actually connect directly to it. And the big thing is now that Office 2013 is now supported. That was a big thing with the old versions of Excel or old versions of Cognos Express, is that you had to have Office 2010 or under. 2013 is now supported both 32 and 64-bit. One big, huge addition for this version is the addition of Cognos Analysis for Microsoft Excel, or CAFE, as it's known as. This gives you huge performance over Perspectives and Architect over the WAN. The way it communicates with the server is a completely different technology. So you'll notice that your reports will render much quicker, recalculate much faster in CAFE versus Perspectives. You also have the ability to drill up, drill down, and drag and drop items from both TM1 and BI. So whereas Perspectives was limited to just TM1 content, CAFE will actually bring in anything from a package and or a TM1 cube and drop it directly into your report. You can also create calculated cells on demand. So this is good for roll-ups, difference in versions, etc. Anything that you want to do ad hoc in CAFE, you can do that without having to do an Excel formula necessarily. And again, CAFE is compatible with both Office 2013, 32, and 64-bit. Okay. Now we'll get some time for questions. So if you've got any questions that you want to ask us, please put them in the chat window. And we've got a few here. I think we've got time for 2 or 3. So the first question is pricing changing for this release? No. IBM has not changed the pricing model for version 10.2.2. It's exactly the same as it was. So if you purchased a previous version of Express, It's the same pricing that you had before. Another question. Given the new functionality released in this version, is 10.2.2 a free upgrade to customers paying support? Yes. So just like with any IBM product, as long as you're up to date on your maintenance, you can go out to the IBM website and download the install and upgrade it. Now, the install for Express is a little bit different than the install for previous versions. They are separate installs now, so the Cognos BI install is separate from the TM1 piece, but you are free to go out and get that if you're paid up on your maintenance. Third question is probably the last one that we'll have time to get to. Can someone with Cognos Express in one department integrate with the enterprise version in another? Let me give you some explanation around this. It is possible within a company that multiple groups within that company has bought the IBM software separately. One division may have purchased Express, and another division, or maybe the company as a whole, purchased Enterprise. And those would sit in two different servers, two different installs. And this question is, can those integrate with each other automatically? The answer is no, and it's not any different than the previous versions of Express. The only way to really get the data back and forth between those would be to export it to either tables and or files, and then import them on the other. So you cannot directly connect Cognos Express instances with the enterprise instances. That's all the time that we've got for questions. Any other questions that have been submitted, we will follow up with you individually via email. But we thank you for attending the webinar and appreciate your time. Thank you.